we're going to go with something that I already have in the stash, and that is the Takom T-54B. This kit here. Okay. I received this one as a gift. I think it was a Christmas gift last year. It's one I've been wanting and just very excited to get a chance to work on it. The reason I'm wanting to build this is because I want to do an Iraqi version, and I'd like to do an abandoned version from Desert Storm. So that's going to be the plan. I was considering putting it on a base. I haven't completely committed to that idea just yet, but I might put it on a base of sand or some sort of street where the vehicle's been left. Okay, so I'm just going to go through, kind of take a look at the instructions, and then pretty much just jump in on the kit. I did want to kind of talk about a little bit of my plan here. The plan's still formulating, but what I'm looking at is just basically a vehicle that was just left behind, right? Everybody just jumped out, they just gave up. We hear that this sort of thing did happen in Desert Storm, happened quite often actually. I didn't necessarily want to put any bullet holes or any any sort of other arms fire in the vehicle. I didn't want to have like the top blown off or anything like that. It was just going to be straight up abandoned. That said, I would like to weather it quite a bit. Have our regular kind of chipping effects, our streaking effects, certainly a lot of sand effects. I'm also thinking about taking up one of these flaps or these fenders and just sort of bringing it up. I've seen a lot of photos in a couple of my books that showed that. I'm questioning whether or not I'm going to use the piece of wood or put a piece of wood there or not. I'm probably going to leave off one of the cans. I noticed also that the cans rusted very, very heavily, so that'll be fun. I'm going to tackle that. Some rusting effect. Rusting is an effect I tend to stay away from. That's a hot debate in the model world, whether to rust or not. And I just have a hard time finding rust on a lot of vehicles. These tanks being the exception. So we're going to go ahead and rust that one. But I don't want to get into that debate. You're welcome to put your opinion in the comments. That's one of the big topics when you're on Facebook or YouTube. Everybody's got an opinion about that one way or the other. It's going to be a pretty standard sand gray kind of color. I'm looking to mix these three colors. We're looking at deck tan, sky gray, and then just the standard Tamiya white. I think if I mix probably all of these, one part each, or maybe even 2 parts gray, 1 part deck tan, 1 part white, that might give me just the right color. The colors did vary on these vehicles, so I'm just going to go through some of my books and find the shade or the tone of gray that I like the most, and that's how I'm going to pick it. So this is interesting. Step 1, they're asking for me to fill in or to remove some pieces here, but they're not present. So I'm guessing this is on a different version, but I'm surprised that the instructions are inaccurate in that regard. Okay, well. Okay, so now I want to tackle something else I'm seeing here on the first step. There's this insert in the instructions, this sort of box here. And strangely enough, it's asking me to remove these massive sections from the hull. The question is, how do I go about this? And I could scrape, right? Or remove chunks of it with the blade. I could probably work with a razor saw. Kind of coming at it. I don't know exactly how because this isn't flush. So that would be kind of out of the question. I could potentially scribe it out, but I'm trying not to. You'll notice there's a lip here. Well, this is the part I want to keep because it runs through the actual wall here, and I just want to remove the surface material. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go at it with some clippers and go at it like that and just work it down. Okay. These are the Tamiya cutters. They're for a little bit more delicate work. I don't think I have anything that's a little bit more aggressive. So we're gonna stick with these for now, and then probably invest in some Xuron clippers or something else, okay? Because apparently we need that. So let's start with these here. I'm gonna try to stay relatively flush, but if I leave excess, it's easier to remove excess than it is to fill it in with putty or something. So let's just go ahead and try to keep it as straight as we can. And go. All right, now I'm not gonna be able to get the cutters to go further in, so what I do is I snip this part off. Okay, and then continue on. Okay, I'm gonna be careful to look and make sure I'm not taking off any of that wall there. And this is rare. I don't normally encounter kits where this is needed. At least not the newer Takom or AFV Club kit, so that's alright. It seems to be working just fine. These are just flying off to my shirt. I should set a good example here and go ahead and wear some protection over the eyes. Good to have a set of goggles like these. Alright, here we go. Let's continue on. And as I showed, there's many ways to do the same thing. There's many ways to do something, but there's always kind of an easier, more efficient way. And clippers, I find, are the best way to just remove chunks of plastic rather than sitting there with a razor or anything like that. So now I'm going to want to go over the side, and it's just enough, a little too much to need a knife rather than sanding sticks. I have I have some really aggressive coarse ones. I'm not going to use that. So we'll work it with a knife and take our time. Again, this is a new blade, and I've already scratched off another section of it, so let's be careful. This is a brand new blade, that's what we want. Alright, so I'm going to go with the sanding stick now. I've got it down pretty good. And this is at this point I would say kind of a medium grit level. And when I sand, I like to go in one direction. Make sure I'm not shaking any cameras or anything. Okay. And then to go in opposite direction. Alright, and after a while, I like to use the sanding stick sort of cleaning bar. You can see it removes all the material. This is more for like circular saws, like those wheels for circular saws, but this works great for sanding sticks. So I like to go in one direction and then in a different direction. The idea being that as we're scraping, we're removing material, but then leaving these little valleys and hills, right? These little mountains. So if I go like that, and then I go this direction, I'm now scraping off the mountains. If I keep going in this direction, I'm not really taking off the top material. So I take off the top material by going this way. And really the best, I think ultimately, if you think about that way, the best method then is circular. Sort of achieving all of those movements, okay? So I'll go in circular, I'll go in sort of perpendicular to each other. See, and then now this way. Circular motion, go the other direction, go back around. Alright, let's take another look. That side is pretty well done. There's a little bit of a shadow there. I'll take a look at that, see if it's a problem, but I think we got it down pretty good. Obviously I have to do the other side next, but I'm not going to bore you in this video. But that's how I deal with those sorts of problems. I wanted to kind of catch you up on our Takom T-54B model here. As you can see, I've got much of the hull together. I've got a lot of the Photo-Etch grills here ready to go. But I wanted to tackle a couple of things today. This side section here for the hull, I actually wanted to start to add some damage to it, kind of early on in the process. As you know, this is going to be an abandoned vehicle. It's not going to be, you know, shot up with firearms damage or anything like that. It's just going to be, you know, sort of not well taken care of, let's put it that way. So I've got a couple of plans for these sections here, and I think first thing I need to kind of tackle is I need to clean this area up, and it actually needs to be, it needs to look pretty good under here. As you can see, there's a lot of pin marks, there's a bunch of holes here. These are holes so that we can align pieces on top of them, but I'm actually going to fill everything in. The reason is our track is going to be right about here, and with this I'm going to have this section sort of buckling, and with that happening we're going to be able to see underneath all of this. And as you can see, they went ahead and actually molded some raised lines here. I was looking at my references, and you can see underneath, in some of the photos you can see underneath this, and there are in fact these raised portions here. I'm gonna smooth everything out and then add those later on. So we're gonna deal with that. I'm going to remove this line here and replace it with a much thinner one. That'll help give the impression that it's sort of buckling and fragile, which they really actually are. And these flaps in the front, these sort of fenders here, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to let's not smooth them out, I'm going to thin them out. So I need to fill all of this, and then I'm going to go about sort of grinding some of this down. Especially right here, right at the edge, the leading edge of this flap should really be, you know, paper thin almost. This is just sheet metal. And then after all of that, I'm not sure if I'll include it in this video or not, but I'm going to go ahead and add a lot of dents to this and a lot of the top parts. So anyway, let's go ahead and just tackle some of this work, and I want to kind of show you how I like to do it. So let's go ahead and tackle this now. I'm going to start thinning this out. For this, I like to use a scalpel. I think this might just be the best way to do it. There are a lot of ways to take care of this. I could grind it down with a Dremel tool. I've got one here. I could start working with the sanding stick, but if I work with the sanding stick, the sanding sticks I like to use sort of at the latest stage to really get it very, very fine, very sort of thin. I do want to start taking off material. What I don't want to do is do it at an angle so that only the very, very tip of it is thin. I actually want to dig out quite a bit of it so that it really gives the impression or the appearance that all of this is thinned out. All right, so remember, this should all be basically sheet metal. It's not bad. I now want to take a look at some of these edges here. I also need to have the edges thinned out. I don't want to work from this edge. I don't want to remove this material, so I'm going to kind of thin it out from the inside. Let's take a look at some of our files here. Let's try... all right, let's see if I can get that thinned down. It's a fairly coarse circular file. All right, so now I'm going to continue to work this down. Again, I'm not just focusing on the edge. There's quite a bit of plastic coming off. That's great. That's what we want. Okay, so that's thin enough now, and then I'll come at that with either a file or a sanding stick to bring it down. So let's now continue work on just this section here. All right, what do we want to do? We want to continue work here. Let's see if I can. Okay, there. I can scrape away more with the scalpel. So there you go. The scalpel is going to get this work done much better than the hobby knife. And what I'm doing is I'm grabbing right on the blade itself, allowing it to scrape. Okay. All right, continue to scrape until it's relatively flush. All right, so now the plan is to start smoothing this out. So I'm going to take a fairly coarse sanding stick here and start going for it. Let me move everything out of the way. This will get a little bit messy. There's a little bit of a lip here. I'm just gonna work through it. I'm not gonna worry about it too much. Everything's just gonna get sanded down. Pin marks. Okay. Great. We're getting there. Don't think I need to fill this. Okay, great. Okay. Good. Okay, it's a good start. I don't want to go too crazy. I don't need to get it perfectly refined. One reason is I'm going to be filling in these holes. So I'll need to do sanding anyway later on down the road. All right, so how to fill these in? That's the next question. All right. So I'm going to take my stash of sort of round shapes here from Evergreen. I'm going to take some different thicknesses here. That one. And this pretty thin one. Here we go. Okay. I think that's going to work. So now I'm just going to kind of see if they fit. It's just on the edge of being too thick. Yeah, okay, so we'll go to the next one down. All right, and that's gonna work nicely. Now remember, these are attachment points for these boxes. What I'm gonna do is probably leave some of the boxes off, probably leave some of the boxes on, and I'm just going to use this and other references as a guide rather than relying on the attachment points. I just don't need them. And I'd rather have, you know, underneath all of this, I'd rather have it look smooth without any sort of holes. So that's what I'm going for here. All right. They even ask you to drill some of these out, and I'm not going to do that either. All right. Let's continue. So the way I want to do this now is prepare some of these. All right. And I'm going to take a tweezer here and just find some of these to place them in. Okay, now you see that one's freestanding, which is great. And I sort of have to to consider both sides. So once everything's glued, I'm going to trim this off. And actually, that's a good question. Should I trim this off first before tackling this part? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. All right, hold. This might be up here. Let's take a nicer pair of the Tamiya cutters. All right, so now I'm gonna trim off this piece and replace it with much thinner plastic, or even some thin foil or metal or something, okay? Okay, now I'm going to start to make this flush, trying not to bump into this other detail. So now I'm going to go ahead and go with start filling in some of these holes. All right. And I'll have a much easier time now clipping off the end. So let me just show you what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to take some of this Tamiya Extra Thin, drop it. Careful. All right, kind of move it around a little bit and then clip off. Okay, and I left a little bit excess there. It's totally fine. Here you can see there's a little bit of a lip there. All right, so I haven't filled it perfectly, so this is where I'm going to work with CA glue. You can also use putty. Putty's tricky. Putty shrinks, and it ends up sometimes being more of a hassle than it's worth. So CA, no problems. Okay, and I'm probably just going to put a little bit on the edge here as well, just in case. Once that dries, I'll sand it down. We'll be good to go. All right, so let me spend some time now. I'm just going to fill in the rest of these. So I think that'll do it for this video. I hope this was helpful. This is not really a how-to video. This is a how-I video. This is really how I like to solve these problems. This might seem, in terms of amount of work and detail, this might seem like overboard for some modelers, but this is the level that I like to be at when it comes to construction and detailing. These are the things that I sort of value the most in models. Painting's important, of course, and weathering's also important, decals, etc. But I just really enjoy the construction aspect of it. Now I'm going to show you how I inflict damage on vehicle parts. This is essentially like a box, and it is basically fairly thin metal, and so I'm going to add some dents to it. And this is a technique I think it's ignored quite a bit. We go off and chip a whole lot, but we forget to actually add the dents that occur on these vehicles. Again, this is a T-54. It's going to be abandoned. And I've noticed a lot of my references, unless the vehicle has been completely rebuilt or repaired, I've noticed a lot of denting, especially on these parts of the vehicle. So just to show you what I mean, these are some that have already been finished. And I took a lot of time on this section. I filled a lot of the holes here. They asked me to drill out some holes as attachment points for parts that go on top of here. I did not drill them out. There is this one little hole here that I might need to take care of. It's an attachment point for a hook that is holding the, I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, one of the cables. Whether I decide to have that hook or not, I'll decide a little bit more down the road. But as you can see, I reapplied these sort of half circle pieces here. Everything's been thinned out here. The edge, I basically started from the edge. I added damage here. Again, these flaps, I have not seen actually a pristine flap on this vehicle, or T-55s in the Iraqi service. So I just damaged it up, added a dent here, added the indentations, all these dents here, and then attached them to the vehicle. You can see I've even sort of added some buckling here or some damage along the edge. These often are scraped up, so I'm just kind of go along here, just kind of scrape pieces off. And then eventually there's also going to be a very thin strip of plastic along here, and I wanted to leave it off until the last step, so that I can kind of conform it to the shape. And if there's any places that I need to break it, I'll go ahead and do it at that time. I imagine I will be breaking it because it's very thin and very fragile, and at certain points some of it will be coming off. Speaking of parts that come off, I went ahead and made this. This part was molded on to the vehicle, and it had these two sort of attachments here, so I replicated them as you can see here with brass rod and some extra little tubing pieces that I had lying around. This piece in the instructions is L12. It's going to have several pieces on it, so there's going to be these parts that sort of hang down on this side and some pieces here, so I'm going to just avoid those areas. I don't want to cause any fitting problems down the road, but basically it's going to sit, reviewing the instructions as I do this, it's going to sit right about here. So let's just go ahead and start here. I'm going to pick this part right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm working with the scalpel, and I'm just kind of kicking stuff around to kind of see. And I think for this one I'm just going to actually gouge some of the plastic out here. I think that might just be the best way to do it. So I want to come at it from both sides if I'm trying to create sort of a dent. Okay, could go a little bit deeper, and I'm going to concentrate just a little bit on just the center. And I want to go at it from different angles. That's not bad. All right, so now to sort of help smooth things out, I'm going to take a sanding stick here. All right, that's not bad. I'm going to find another spot. I said along here also makes sense as well. What I want to do is have it look a little bit different than what I did here on these bolts. So I'm going to put this one kind of right at the center. Let's do that. Okay. And for this one, I'm going to dig a little bit more. And this is just one way to do this. There are other ways to create dents. And there we go. Looks pretty good. Going to continue to sand it with a sanding stick. Just kind of smooth out any rough edges. You can keep the rough edges there if you'd like, but I like to smooth it out. I think this one I'm just going to keep on the edge as well. Maybe come forward a little bit. I really prefer using scalpel for this effect as opposed to a hobby knife. The fact that it's curved helps a lot. And as you can see, I'm actually holding the blade Okay, I think that'll be just fine. Okay, I'm going to create just a little notch on the end here, relatively deep one, and then another just up a little higher up here. All right, I think that'll work fine. There's a little bit too much symmetry perhaps to it, but that's okay. I can exaggerate them when it comes time to do the actual chipping, which I'll probably do with, I'll most likely do with oils. And I can exaggerate some and not others. I can decide also, did the dent occur in such a way that it scraped the paint off, or did it just buckle a bit and the paint has not been affected at all? So those are other things to sort of take into consideration, and I'm sure I'll be doing a video about that at that stage in the future here. All right, that'll work. Today we're just going to jump right into this video. I've got a few things I want to show you. And as you can see here, I'm attaching a strip of styrene that I'm using to replace the edge of this fender. The edge that was supplied by the kit, was molded on, was far too thick, just way out of scale. And also I knew that I was going to damage up this fender quite a bit. So I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to put a new strip down, something that was thin enough and something that could be very kind of easily damaged and would look realistic. So I'm adding it here. I'm using my tweezers. I'm using some Tamiya thin cement. In this case, probably I would have been better off had I not used the quick setting type, but I wanted to see if I could work with that here. I do like the quick setting because it's a little bit more aggressive, and what I was hoping it would do would be melt the plastics together a little bit more, sort of fuse them together. And that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm also crimping as I go, so I'll just do like an inch at a time, laying the strip down. If I attempted to just put it all on at once, it's just not going to work. So I needed to do an inch at a time. Again, I've already sort of buckled, damaged up the fender, so I needed to sort of follow those same contours. And here I am applying damage to the strip with several different tools. In some cases I'm cutting them with Tamiya clippers, sometimes I'm just using the tweezers, and just continually applying the glue, trying to get it to set right. Okay, moving on. The kit supplied a log that is to be attached to the rear of the vehicle. And I decided I was not going to attach it. Looking at my references of Iraqi vehicles, I just didn't. I found some with the log and some without, and I decided I wanted to leave it off. So that said, I needed to then create these sort of attachment points that are used to hold the log in place. And I wasn't really able to salvage anything from the kit. There were pieces that were molded onto the log, but they didn't even look right according to my references. So I decided I was just gonna just make some new ones completely scratch built out of plastic. As you can see here, I'm using a panel line scraper to sort of dig out a section out of this triangle. And here we have the 4 triangles attached to the vehicle. Next up, I needed to make some other pieces that were going to hang down at the bottom. As you can see, I drilled 4 holes in each of these pieces and then attached a couple of panels on top of each of those to get the right look. So the next thing that I wanted to tackle was removing this triangular ring from this particular piece that was going to be attached. It's basically a cover for the engine deck, one of the engine grilles, And I'm going to lean it back against the mounts for the oil drums. And since that was the case, I was going to need for it to hang a bit. So here you can see I've removed the piece and I fashioned a new one out of brass rod, and here it is now attached, and here it is hanging off the vehicle. As you can see, because of the angle of this plate, I needed for it to hang a bit. Next up, I'm going to create some damage on these grills. When I work with PE, you know, we're always so careful to make everything look perfect. But looking at my references, I've seen so many grills off of these T54 and T55s that were just had complete gaps in them. And I mean, even pictures of vehicles in museums have a lot of damage on these grills. So I wanted to replicate that here. I knew this was going to be fun, so I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to film this. This is something I had in mind for the vehicle, even from the very beginning. I really had a lot of fun doing this effect. I did want to be careful to not give it any sort of symmetry, but really make it seem kind of natural that this damage happened over a long period of time. Today we're going to be priming the vehicle. As you can see, it's ready to go for priming. This is the step we do right before painting, but I don't always prime. I will only typically prime if I'm working with metal that is photo-etch pieces or any sort of, you know, excessive amount of evergreen plastic. Otherwise, I simply won't prime the model. However, I absolutely love this Tamiya surface primer. The gray version is fantastic. It levels really well. It dries super quick and is very, very strong. And as you can see here, I just start with, you know, misting some light coats. I'm trying really hard to not clog these photo-etch grills here. I will reposition the vehicle to make it comfortable and make sure that I'm hitting all sides of the photo-etch and plastic. Next up is the turret, and the turret has mostly plastic at this point, so it's a good reason to just go ahead and prime it. The primer allows for better adhesion for the paints. The primer also allows for me to see any sort of flaws that I might have missed. And now here's the vehicle with the base coat and the markings applied. The base coat is a combination of Tamiya paints, Tamiya XF55, XF19, and XF2. This allowed for me to get a color that I liked and that I thought represented the vehicle well. Just a little side note about how I choose colors and why I decide to mix. I find that in my references, which I like to work from books if I can. Of course, the internet is a wonderful resource for photos as well. But I find that there are many, many factors that can change the color of an image. For instance, the sky might have clouds. It might be a different time of day. It might be morning. It might be afternoon. It might be just before night. The actual camera settings might be different from photo to photo. So since there's all kinds of variations, what I tend to do is I'll find photos of the color that I like the best, and I will go ahead and try to replicate that. And that's why I like to mix and match different colors and not just sort of rely on one photo or somebody else's opinion about what the color should be. For this vehicle, I chose sort of a lighter gray sand as opposed to more of a yellow sand. And I thought that this was more interesting and was a color that showed up quite often in my references of these Iraqi T-54s. The books that I use are a series of books from Concord Publications. One in particular is Operation Desert Saber, The Desert Rats Liberation of Kuwait by Bob Morrison. This book is fantastic. It's been a wealth of information. It has been the inspiration for about 4 or 5 models up to this point. A final note about the markings. They have all been hand painted just as they would have been in real life. It was a lot of fun to do this. I did really, take my time. I may have messed up on one symbol here and there and went ahead and painted over, but overall it was a really, really pleasurable experience. But I've noticed on these vehicles, these T-54, 55, 69s, the Chinese knockoffs, or the T-62s, what I find sometimes are photos of some chipping or scraping that has occurred along the sides of the vehicle, and in particular this front fender. So I'm going to replicate that. Alright, so I think what we're looking at here is going to be a mixture of gray. So we're going to get some black going, and I need some white, obviously. And I think there's just the slightest bit of brown in there, so I'm going to use a little bit of that as well. Alright, so now going to want to have more white than any other color at this point. I'm not sure how much I'll need. I'll kind of kick some off the side here. There we go. And then I'm going to go into the black a bit. Not too much. It doesn't take much black to get a gray. Okay, that's about as much as I want to go. I think that'll work. Good. Okay. Yeah, it's worthwhile to really take your time and try to look at, try to, I don't know, there's something about really just taking your time mixing the color that just goes a long way. Alright. So now I'm going to apply this, it's thinned down, but it's still pretty, it's not runny. I don't want runny right now. I want to be able to just drop it in certain places. I'm going to come over the side a little bit. And at this point, I think I'm just going to go ahead and add the detail as we go, so I don't get caught up in this sort of shape that I was getting before. It's almost like these little archipelagos hanging off the edge here. And they all seem to have a good straight edge to them as well. I don't want them to be fuzzy at all. Okay, I'm going to pull up. There's a bit of a dent there, so we'll work on that as well. I'm going to pull up into this direction. I'm not going to do exactly what I see in the photo. I'll make it pretty close. And then I think there's a whole nother set of patches, or a whole nother patch kind of up here. a little bit of asymmetry to this scrape. And this looks to me like, you know, a scratch or scrapes that have accumulated over time. Let me show you the effect I'm going to add now. And I'm going to do it on this piece of paper. So this is the kind of look I'm going for here. That kind of look. Alright? I like how it's misshapen. I also don't want it to be, I want to load it up with a lot of paint. You see how this is feathered here? It's a little bit softer. This is better. This one is pretty good. So I'm going to try to load up as much as I can and then just drop it in that spot, and hopefully it looks right. Okay, so I'm going to do that kind of on a smaller scale here. Because again, I've got too much, and it looks like, you know, archipelagos, right? Like Florida. It's a little too shapely, so I want to kind of kick off of it and do away with that perfect look. It's not bad. Let's see if I can. And this one I just smudged into the other. I think that's probably, that's going to be best, I think. Yeah, good. If the soldier's coming out here, footsteps all the way down. All right. All along this edge. Okay, I want to load up a bit. So I get a little bit harsher effect. Okay, so that gives you an idea there. We're gonna let this dry up, and then I'll take some pictures and show you the finished product. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit subscribe. Please hit like if you enjoyed this video. Please hit the bell for future notifications of this build and future builds. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.